Okay. This hearing will come to order, and good morning. Welcome to today's hearing on networking and information technology research and development, or as it's commonly known, NITRD Act. Last year, this committee held an oversight hearing on NITRD program. At that hearing, we heard from a panel of expert witnesses on the findings of a recent assessment of the program carried out by the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. The PCAST recommendation and the testimony of the witnesses served as the basis for the legislation proposed as we're reviewing today. Last week, there was a symposium at the Library of Congress celebrating the achievements of computing research. During the opening session of the symposium, one speaker cited a New York Times article to illustrate how far computing has come and to demonstrate how profoundly information technology has changed our lives. The article contained a laundry list of life-changing innovations over the last 30 years. Notably, 2/3 of the items on the list, such as the Internet, open source software, and laptop computers, were the result of advances in information technology research. This result clearly demonstrates that information technology is a major driver of the economy and growth, and that advances in the field have the potential to dramatically influence all aspects of our lives, from manufacturing and healthcare to education and entertainment. In short, research in networking and information technology translates into U.S. scientific, industrial, and military competitiveness. The legislative proposal we are reviewing today responds to two categories of concerns expressed by the PCAST assessment: the strength of NITRD programs, planning and coordinating functions, and the balance of the research portfolio. First, the legislation addresses the PCAST recommendations to strengthen the planning, coordination, and prioritization components of the program by requiring development and periodic update of a strategic plan that will create a vision for information technology R&D, allowing for continued technological breakthroughs and maintaining U.S. leadership. Next, the legislation addresses the PCAST recommendation for increased support of large-scale, long-term, interdisciplinary research by creating large-scale R&D rewards that not only encourage collaboration among the NITRD agencies, but also promote collaboration between the academic and industry researchers. And past achievements have shown that this large-scale, long-term partnerships are a recipe for success. Many of the technical advances that led to today's computers and the Internet evolved from past research sponsored by industry and government, often in partnership and conducted by the industry, university, and federal labs. And finally, the legislation highlights the need for increased research in the area of cyber physical systems. Cyber physical systems such as the power grid and home healthcare devices are computer-driven systems connected with the physical world. The prevalence of these systems is likely to increase, but technical advances are needed to realize their full potential. The legislation calls for an industry, university task force to explore the mechanisms for carrying out collaborative R&D in this important area. And while there has been breathtaking progress in the field of information technology, I believe the best is yet to come. And now the Chair recognizes Mr. Hall for any opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And before I make an opening statement, we're always proud when we have people in the audience that are related to us and that are praying for us and working for us. And Malay, who wrote this opening statement for me, his mother is in the audience. Her name is Sandra Freeman, and she's from Greenville, South Carolina, but she's been skiing in Boulder, Colorado since the first of the year. And I'm told that Colorado is made up of people from Iowa that don't want any more Texans. I don't know if that's right or not, but welcome. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing us to recognize our own. Thank you, Mr. Chairman Gordon, for scheduling this hearing to receive testimony on draft authorization legislation for the federal government's networking and information technology research and development program. Currently, the NITRD, as they're called, program provides the primary mechanism by which the federal government coordinates the nation's more than $3 billion of unclassified networking and information technology research and development investments. As I stated in our last hearing, given the ever-increasing amounts of networking and information technology that affects our everyday lives, from power grid and water purification systems to automotive improvements and air traffic control equipment to home health and care and health care devices and educational software programs. For all that, it's important that we not only continue to support these R&D efforts, but also make sure that this program is appropriately coordinating with our classified cybersecurity initiatives as well. In fact, I believe that this is of vital importance to our homeland security and to our economy. It's my understanding that at this moment, a computer worm called Conficker C may be affecting millions of computers in ways that we can't even completely identify yet. And whether this pans out to be a serious threat or simply a perceived threat, the ability for people to create this kind of computer havoc is a real problem. So I'd suggest that non-classified cybersecurity efforts are just as important. Hopefully our witness will discuss and address that today as well. I know that your staff's been working diligently with ours to put together good, solid legislation, and I appreciate this bipartisan effort. The draft before us is a culmination of recommendations from the PCAST report, feedback we've received from numerous organizations, and witness testimony received in a hearing held on this topic last year. So I'm sure we'll learn today that there are yet more ways we can improve this bill, and I hope that we can continue to work together to ensure that it moves forward in a bipartisan fashion and with bipartisan support. And our chairman, I think, is a champion of that type of support. I look forward to hearing the views of our witnesses today and their recommendations about how we can make an already exemplary interagency program even better. And I yield back my time, and I thank the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. If there are other members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added at the record at this point. Let me thank our witnesses for being here. We're one witness short right now. We have experienced sometimes that getting to the line downstairs can slow people down. There can be other problems. And so we will certainly treat that witness with respect if they come in later and do it in whatever is the appropriate way. Also, I want you to know that there's a busy schedule here in Congress today, too. The lack of bodies in the seats is not a lack of interest. This is a very important issue, and they'll be following it with their staffs. And you're right, Mr. Hall, this has been a good bipartisan start. Millay has been an integral part of putting this together as usual, and she is very important to this committee. So at this time, I want to introduce our witnesses. First is Dr. Chris Greer, is the director of the NIDRD National Coordinating Office. Dr. Peter Lee is the head of the Computer Science Department at Carnegie Mellon University. And Dr. Deborah Estrin is the director of the Center for Embedded Networking Sensing at UCLA. Thank you for being here. As you know, we try to keep the oral statements to 5 minutes, but this is an important area, and we're not going to take you out with a hook because we want to hear what you have to say. Your written testimony will be included as a part of the record. And I probably at the end of the day have a couple of more questions that I'm going to give to you that you then can respond back in writing. We want to get this right. So we will start with Dr. Greer.
Good morning.
Let's see, and you want to turn on your microphone. There we go.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Chris Greer, Director of the National Coordination Office for the Networking and Information Technology Research and Development Program. And hereafter, I'll refer to those as NCO and NIDRD by their acronyms, respectively, to keep this brief. With Dr. Jeanette Wing of the National Science Foundation, I also co-chair the NIDRD subcommittee. I thank Chairman Gordon and Ranking Member Hall and the members of the committee for the opportunity to come before you today to discuss the NIDRD program and the committee's draft Networking and Information Technology Research and Development Act of 2009. My written testimony provides a comprehensive response to the questions the committee posed in preparation for this hearing. And in my oral comments, I want to focus on two specific points. First, we view the recommendations of the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, the PCAST, and this committee's interest is helpful in further improving the NIDRD framework. Our goal, as yours, is to enable the NIDRD program to serve the nation even more effectively in the future. Since I last appeared before you 8 months ago, we've continued our vigorous response to the full spectrum of the PCAST recommendations. Our strategic planning process provides an example of that. The plan we are designing comprises elements operating at multiple levels, embraces the emphasis areas identified by PCAST, focuses significantly on opportunities for large-scale, long-term R&D, and benefits from a diversity of means for community input, including a request for information published in the Federal Register, presentations at scientific and technical meetings, individual one-on-one interviews, and small group discussions, a public strategic planning forum, a webcast globally, and an opportunity for public comment on the draft text. The NCO is the focal point for supporting this planning process, the spectrum of outreach efforts that inform the plan, the response to the other PCAST recommendations, and of course the full range of NIDRD program activities. The NCO is currently developing its own strategic plan to further strengthen its capabilities in support of the NIDRD program. Now, the second point I wanted to make this morning is the critical importance of balance in the NIDRD portfolio. The vision of previous amending legislation from this committee and of the NIDRD agencies over the years has been for a balanced portfolio, one that recognizes that hardware innovations are constrained without corresponding advances in software. The use of advanced networks will be limited without improvements in security and in reliability. The massive data sets will not drive progress if the data cannot be preserved, accessed, and used for increased understanding, and so on. I urge the committee to continue its history of crafting a framework that enables the NIDRD portfolio of investments to respond to our nation's changing IT needs and opportunities. This includes recognizing the contemporary scope of the NIDRD program, positioning emphasis areas in the context of the full NIDRD landscape, providing for an advisory committee with the expertise to offer strategic guidance on emphasis and balance to the program and to the President, and encouraging strategic, large-scale, long-term research in all agency contexts. So thank you for your work on the reauthorization legislation and for the opportunity to appear before you today. We at NIDRD and the National Coordination Office, many of the staff, outstanding staff of whom are behind me today, including Ernest McDuffie, who's the Associate Director, Diane Thies, and Virginia Moore, who are office leaders. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Greer, and we're glad the guys that get the work done are here today, too, to hear firsthand. Dr. Lee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Hall, and other members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on the NIDRD program. My name is Peter Lee. I am, as you mentioned, the head of the Computer Science Department at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm also the incoming chair for the Board of Directors of the Computing Research Association, which is the key representative organization for over 30 industry labs and government organizations and 225 academic institutions in computing research. You mentioned the symposium last week, Computing Research That Changed the World. I had the great privilege to attend that symposium, which was co-sponsored by several members of your committee. It was a fantastic showcase for about 20 years of past advances in IT research, advances that have really touched every part of our lives, advanced our economy, and enabled innovation in a multitude of scientific and engineering fields, such as mapping the human genome, creating the World Wide Web and Google, and even now digitizing the world's books so everyone can access them. For all these past successes, what I found most exciting was that we are still in our infancy. We're on the cusp of major new advances in media and communication technologies, new tools for managing energy and the environment, and new technologies for improving healthcare. The pace of innovation is really breathtaking. Looking ahead, the question that enters my mind is who will lead in future innovations? Today, many countries are investing heavily in facilities, education, and research in network and information technology. Consider, for example, the emerging field of cyber-physical systems that you had mentioned in your opening remarks. This is the science of computing systems tightly integrated with the physical world, and this promises to enable new advances in transportation, medicine, and many other areas, even consumer products such as toys. It is no secret that the Europeans today are investing heavily, many billions of dollars, in fact, in cyber-physical systems today. We here look to industry, but industry is not able to support the kind of speculative research in such emerging areas to the level that's necessary. Thus, your support, our government's support for this type of research, as the NIDR-D program is designed to provide, is crucial for remaining competitive. Given the strong track record of university and industry partnerships in information technology, I'm confident that these investments will be paid back many times over. The current legislation, thankfully, strengthens the NIDR-D program by addressing many of the key recommendations in the 2007 PCAST assessment. I applaud this. However, I still think that there are major challenges, particularly for university-based IT research. I'd like to address just a couple of them with you today. First, today, a staggering 86% of all academic computer science research funding comes from the National Science Foundation. As my written testimony explains, the lack of a broader base of agency support leads to several problems, including making researchers less likely to propose the kinds of high-risk, high-return, multidisciplinary research that we all recognize is necessary. I therefore recommend achieving a broader base of support for our university-based research by urging more agencies to take greater responsibility for advancing both fundamental and multidisciplinary IT research. Second, the PCAST assessment recommends that NIDR-D encourage innovation risk-taking, and in fact the legislation encourages this by promoting both large-scale and multidisciplinary research. I would also like to urge that agencies develop patience, the patience for long-term, sustained, and stable funding. This will be key to re-energizing high-risk innovative proposals. And then finally, an area that deserves special mention is the pipeline of talent in information technology. Simply put, we are not attracting enough good people into the field. This problem is particularly acute with women and underrepresented minorities. In my written testimony, I offer several recommendations from the computing research community that would bring a federal focus to issues in computer science education at the K-12 level. And this would enable emerging concepts in computational thinking to make their way into the education of all Americans. So in summary, network and information technology research and development is a field full of amazing opportunities and is a cornerstone for our future competitiveness. By encouraging broader agency support and stable, long-term university-based research support, along with a healthy pipeline of talent, we can ensure U.S. leadership into the future. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to address the NIDR-D program. My written testimony includes many more details about the points I've raised here, as well as answers to the questions you have posed in writing. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. And now we'll hear from Dr. Estrin.
Thank you, Chairman Gordon and Ranking Member Hall, for inviting me as well to testify before your committee on this important legislation. I'm a professor of computer science and electrical engineering at UCLA and the founding director of an NSF-funded multidisciplinary science and technology center for embedded network sensing, SENS, which was established in 2002. SENS' research agenda falls under the umbrella of cyber-physical systems. After reviewing the NIDR-D legislation as requested, I concluded strongly that the bill addresses the key recommendations of the PCAST assessment and in the process addresses important needs of networking and information technology research communities. Moreover, the focus on cyber-physical systems will have an impact that extends into the country's commercial leadership, into the sciences, and into public policy. In these oral comments, I'll emphasize two aspects of the legislation: the nature and importance of cyber-physical systems, and the role of multidisciplinary centers in realizing the research agenda. Technological advances of the past 2 decades enable us to combine sensing, computation, and wireless communication in integrated devices that can then be placed in situ, up close to physical phenomenon, whether embedded in engineered systems, such as the power grids and factory floor systems, where they monitor power consumption and indications of malfunctioning components, or embedded in natural systems, such as depleted forest and water resources, measuring physical and chemical parameters, such as temperature and pollutants, or in human systems, such as devices worn on the body, monitoring activity and physiological indicators. Cyber-physical systems are created through a synthesis of technologies, including embedded sensing, sensor actuator controls, mobile sensing, as well as human-computer interfaces. All of these will be advanced by the proposed NIDR-D focus on cyber-physical systems research, and together they will bring us closer to the promise of revolutionary advances in our management of the physical world. First, embedded sensing brings much-needed understanding of physical processes and informs critical decisions. For example, the National Ecological Observatory Network, NEON, an MREFC project, is comprised of in-situ sensing systems which capture and transmit measurements into web-based data management and geospatial modeling systems in real time. This powerful and programmable observing system will employ a broad spectrum of sensor types, from the simplest temperature sensor to the highest resolution digital imagers. And it will greatly promote our understanding of ecosystems and thus inform critical issues in resource management and land use policy. Second, when sensing is combined with automated actuation in a tight control loop, we enter a new regime in which physical processes can be managed and manipulated at the time scale of the physical phenomenon, not just at the time scale at which human beings are able and available to react. For example, systems that implement precise and localized management of water and power resources can manage real-time inputs and demands on the system and make adjustments to resource treatment and distribution in real time. Third, mobile sensing presents tremendous economies to cyber-physical systems because by moving a sensor through an environment, you can achieve high spatial resolution measurements that are not achievable or affordable with fixed sensors alone. Mobility can take multiple forms: a pan-tilt zoom camera for both ecological and built environments, or human-carried devices for personalized measurements of human exposure and interaction. And fourth, most cyber-physical systems are part of larger systems with humans in the loop. They are designed to be used by humans as real-time interactive systems to inform both short-term and long-term decisions and actions. Moreover, the proximity of these systems to people raises the need to attend to privacy in their design, deployment, and usage. And this is another area in which government-funded research can contribute significantly. So in summary of this first of my 2 points in my testimony, the proposed support for cyber-physical systems in the NIDR-D legislation will greatly enhance our ability to address the design challenges of high-impact, physically coupled systems by supporting research in robust and reusable, scalable and validative components, algorithms, and integrated subsystems. It will thereby enable broad-scale, powerful, and programmable environmental observing systems. I want to say a few words before closing about my second point, which is the role of multidisciplinary research centers in realizing this vision. Multidisciplinary research centers offer scope as well as scale, and they require extended timelines in addition to increased funding. In my research center, SENS, the most important results have been iterative, where we began by applying existing technology in an innovative manner to the application scientists' observational needs, and then based on the resulting experience, identified the most important areas for the next phase of innovation. This style of work has great potential for serendipitous results, where you end up in places you did not expect and having learned tremendously more in the process. We've also found consistently that the nature of these applications and this multidisciplinary iterative work attracts a wider range of students. We believe this is because the social utility is very evident and is naturally integrated into the design discussions. We speculated that this social utility would end up appealing and attracting more women to computer science, for example, and we were not disappointed. Our center averages consistently double the percentage of women involved in our programs relative to the rest of the department, and that's 30% as opposed to a 12%. Finally, multidisciplinary centers can contribute significantly to collaborative agency programs, where a technology creation agency could partner with a mission agency to help bridge the gap between funding of the basic ideas and early prototypes and systems that can actually be used and run through trials and exploration before commercialization. A good example of this would be a large-scale, let's say million-person, mobile sensing system that supports preventative and chronic health management and research. Today's mobile phones can easily report activity, location, and prompted user input, such as pain, diet, medication, and other self-reports. And such a project, coordinated between, for example, the NSF and mission-oriented needs of the NIH and the CDC, could prototype and pilot a privacy-preserving, population-scale system that would drive innovation in privacy and security of electronic health records, data analysis and fusion, and computer-human interaction, while also providing unprecedented data sets and an experimental platform for public health and epidemiological studies. So finally, in conclusion, cyber-physical systems cover a broad and important range of networking and information technologies and will be essential in meeting some of the key environmental, economic, and quality of life challenges facing our nation and the world. A broadly focused cyber-physical systems research program in NIDR-D, balanced between fundamental and applied projects, leveraging university, agency, and corporate R&D efforts will go a long way towards ensuring the United States continues to hold a leadership position in this critical field. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to provide my testimony on this important issue. I'm pleased to answer any further questions you might have as you and your colleagues on the committee move the legislation forward.
Thank you, Dr. Estrin. I agree. It's the discovery that you're not expecting is oftentimes more important than the breakthrough that you originally sought. Dr. Lee, I want to go back a little bit to your discussion about what's going on around the rest of the world and the competition that we might have. And you say Europe is really the center or where most of the research is going on outside the United States?
Yes, that's correct.
And are there any lessons learned, what they're doing, that we need to be incorporating? And typically what they'll do is they'll have more of a focus on, on breakthroughs in 2 or 3 different areas. Is that what they're doing there? And if so, where?
Yes, so indeed, one model that I think is very interesting, particularly in the European efforts in hybrid systems, which is roughly speaking their analog to cyber-physical systems. They have a very focused mission orientation in some of their research programs. For example,
is this EU or is this a particular country?
This is EU.
Okay.
And in the so, for example, in one major initiative, they would like cyber-physical systems or hybrid systems that would eliminate any possibility of collisions in the high-speed rail systems throughout Europe. And so this provides a grand challenge framework, but associated with those large programs are sub-projects that provide sustained long-term basic research funding.
And what is their vehicle for collaboration?
So they have multi-university research teams. Typically,
so it's university-based. Does industry play much of a role?
Industry does play a role. And in fact, in the large mission programs, industry is required to play a role, but they are, in our parlance, sub-awards to the prime awards that are given to the university-based teams. This allows the university teams to really think beyond the bleeding edge, but still provide a long-term partnership with industry to provide a smoother or a greased track, so to speak, for technology transfer.
Take it out, okay. Well, I want to pose a question to all of you. The legislation calls for an industry university task force to explore collaborative research models for cyber-physical systems. Are there other research areas where public-private partnerships would be particularly appropriate, and what characteristics are necessary for a successful industry-university collaboration in networking and IT? That's to Dr. Estrin. You want to start us off?
Certainly. I think successful efforts, everyone needs to be getting something out of the process to get true engagement. An interesting example of something like that is where industry has the capacity to construct things, let's say a highly sensitive sensor type that's needed by a broad range, but they're not going to do it on their own because the commercial market doesn't yet exist. But perhaps there are truly needs for such a sensor, pose it, in health, in ecology, in cleanup of contaminated water. And so by bringing together researchers, agencies that have a need, an industry that has the capacity but wouldn't otherwise produce such a device because the commercial market doesn't yet exist, you can bring those three together in very successful ventures. And a number of the things, projects I would foresee would have that similar quality, where you bring in the capacity of the commercial enterprise, but focusing on problems that are needed for public good that don't yet have the market to have them do it on their own.
And what about the intellectual property? I mean, does that get worked out between the universities and industry relatively smoothly, or what happens there?
In my experience, that works out even more smoothly when the government is involved from the beginning, because it keeps people from even thinking about trying to be greedy in the shorter term. In the end, we found first to market, understanding the technology is the way to go. We've benefited so much from open work. So we do all of our work open and without IP protection. Since this is for the public good, you would want it.
But you think, is that fairly well universal here in the United States?
It's not. I think it's broad enough, and people have seen enough success from it, that it's certainly a practical thing to pursue, an important role for government.
Dr. Lee, you want to add anything there?
Yes, I think that many of the major challenges that computing research is really poised to contribute to, and let me just mention three: cybersecurity, energy, and healthcare. These are sources of grand challenge problems that university and IT-based research alone won't be able to solve. And so partnerships, particularly partnerships with stakeholders, and typically these stakeholders would often be industrial organizations, seem absolutely crucial. I'd like to emphasize again, though, that universities, if we're looking at beyond the leading edge of technology, universities leading in this are absolutely crucial. And I would just bring your attention to the last year's DARPA Urban Challenge, where the top three winners of the DARPA Urban Challenge robot race were, in fact, university teams that had significant industry support, but the universities were leading.
Dr. Greer, you want to conclude there on that topic?
A couple of things I would add to the comments you've already heard. That this characteristics of successful efforts are really twofold. That all involved bring their capabilities to the table, and that all realize real value from the interaction. Those are the key issues that have to be addressed. In addition to the areas Dr. Lee described, the whole area of software development, design, and engineering is a rich one for multi-sector collaboration. In fact, probably requires that networking capability, security, reliability. The vast majority of the networking capability around the globe belongs to the private sector, certainly in this country, than to the government. There are examples of effective cooperation of this type. The Semiconductor Research Corporation is an example of a consortium where it provides neutral ground for all of the parties to reach agreement. For example, a common legal framework, which everybody who wants to participate has got to buy into. So that's, I think, another important value.
Thank you, Dr. Greer. Mr. Hall is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Greer and Dr. Lee are all of the federal agencies involved with NIDR-D pulling their, what we call their weight in this, and what agencies could be doing more and in what area, and whether or not you believe it's a function of funding or is something else involved. Dr. Greer, you want to take a shot at that first?
In my written testimony in the appendix is the list of member agencies and participating agencies. That's a list of 28 federal agencies all told. That's a remarkable set of federal agencies willing to participate in the program. I think that's a very strong signal that there is broad interest. The member agencies are the ones that contribute to our budget. Again, there are 13 of those. Our experience is that the networking and information technology issues touch on the missions of all of the federal agencies in one form or another. And so we encourage their participation and actively seek it as well.
Well, is that, are they listed because they are participating, the 28?
That's right. They are listed because they have On the left-hand side, the ones that contribute to the NCO budget. On the right-hand side, those that participate in other ways in the NIDARD program activities.
And are there others, federal agencies that are involved that could also be on that list?
I certainly think, as I said, almost all federal agency missions touch on this, and I think part of our responsibility is to find those areas where agencies not now participating could realize value from participating.
I guess I'll ask all witnesses whether or not the draft version of the legislation that's before us today helps to achieve an appropriately balanced portfolio, and if not, what's missing or what's been given too much attention. Dr. Greer, you want to take a shot at that again?
Sure. Let's take one specific example, cyber-physical systems. As Dr. Estrin has eloquently pointed out, that touches on a very broad range of issues, and even the definition of a cyber-physical system ranges from a chip in your car to the National Ecological Observatory Network. Quite a range of things. The software for achieving those capabilities, the reliability issues, networking, all of those things go into realizing success in the area of cyber-physical systems. And so an important issue is not to view them as isolated from all of the challenges of across the networking and information technology landscape, but as one of the key priority and goal areas in that landscape.
I have one
Yeah,
comment.
Dr. Lee.
Yes, thank you. I think on the subject of balance, one area that perhaps could use more emphasis, I think the legislation does very well in emphasizing large-scale multidisciplinary research, and that's in response to the PCAST assessment. We shouldn't forget, though, that for all of the wonderful technologies that we see, there is literally an iceberg, a gigantic amount of core research in fundamental algorithms and technologies, and that emphasis on the core, I think, should have equal weight in the legislation.
Dr. Estrin, you gave a very detailed and inclusive opening statement. Do you have anything to add to what either of these gentlemen have said? And if something is missing, what is missing? If something is given too much attention, what is? And if something is not given enough attention, what does it take?
I'll be brief. As was mentioned in the opening statements, I think language about security and privacy would belong and would be a great addition.
About as brief an answer as I've ever gotten from anybody. I'll yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Since you've got a little bit of time left, Dr. Greer, could you finish up on your question? You were saying there needs to be more outreach to other agencies. How would you suggest that? You know, who determines where they are, and how should that outreach be made?
Of course, the legislation that this committee has provided says that the president and the director of OSTP decide who, in the end, is a member of the NIDARD program. So there is
just
that.
In case they were busy that day, I mean, what would
Right.
how do we do this internally?
And what we do at the National Coordination Office is we go to our agency counterparts, explain the role of the NIDARD program, its value to the agencies, identify appropriate points of contact, and start that dialogue. Invite them to our meetings, share our reports with them.
Okay. I see. Thank you. I didn't want to take more time. Ms. Woolsey is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to these wonderful witnesses. You've each said something about the ability of the United States to lead in science, math, technology, information technology in particular, that we have to have an educated workforce. So my questions, and we'll hope to go right down the line, is how are we doing? And there are three members on this committee, Congressman Wu, Dr. Ellers, and myself, who are senior members on the Education and Labor Committee as well. So my question, what can we be doing better to encourage an increase for the recruitment in the education of women and minorities in particular, but in general, all individuals interested in this field that's so important to us. And finally, where does it start in the education system? Does it start at the PhD level, or does it start in the 8th grade or the 6th grade? So could we start? We'll start with you, Dr. Estrin, because actually we want all young. I'm the author of Go Girl, which encourages young girls from the 8th grade on to stay involved in science, math, and technology. And we're going to have a hearing on my committee, and I want you to be one of the witnesses. But let's start from you and go up the stream from there.
I'm delighted this issue is being taken so seriously. And certainly, PhD is far too late. We have far too few people available in the pipeline by then. We must start earlier. 8th grade is just about right. Of course, we need excellent childcare. We need good prenatal nutrition. We need everything that feeds up to the 8th grade. But 8th grade is about the time that these young people start forming their ideas about what they want to do. Something we've been trying to do is put an authentic face on information technology, explaining that it's not just this transparent set of mechanisms that happened behind your screen, but rather it's a way to help save the planet, help save your community, and have no formal evidence on that subject. But as I said, many people who are entering and selecting careers who might otherwise select to become doctors, and now we have greater than 50% in pre-med and medical schools who are women. And our intention is to draw some of those bright, engaged, committed individuals from that community. And finally, the same thing holds when you look at first-generation students becoming the first generation to get college degrees. There again tends to be a commitment to the world, to their community, and they want something that they're on the front lines doing that. And certainly information technology innovations are really very much about that.
Thank you. Dr. Lee?
Thank you very much for this question. It's really an issue that has caused a great deal of anxiety, I would say, in the academic computing research community. I believe, and many of my colleagues believe, that computational thinking is necessary for any educated person in the same way that mathematical thinking or global thinking is becoming necessary for any educated person in our society. And this really has to start, I believe, in the K through 12 system, and maybe the 8th grade level is about right. The National Science Foundation actually has begun a number of important initiatives. One that I would call attention to is the Math-Science Partnership Program. And there are ideas to expand this in order to improve K through 12 computing education. And this would undoubtedly increase access and participation by women and minorities further upstream.
Okay, thank you. Do I have time for Dr. Greer?
Certainly, yes.
Very quickly, I would say that this is one of the largest challenges to the NIDER landscape, and my agency colleagues agree. It should be a centerpiece of our strategic plan. It should address the entire pipeline, including curricula that are inspiring, that put science in the computer science curriculum, that show the opportunity for IT innovation to benefit people, individuals, and our society as a whole, and teachers who are prepared to engage students on that ground.
Before turning the microphone over, I have to be clear. I don't think we start teaching math in the 8th grade. I just know that by the 8th grade, we know there are kids that are very talented that we want to keep in the system. Thank you very much.
Ms. Woosley, your leadership in helping Pass American Competes will help move this ball down the field very much.
That's true. Thank you.
Dr. Roscoe Bartlett was here a little bit earlier, and in talking with him, he mentioned that his son, who he claimed was smarter than him, and even smarter than his mother, which was apparently even a greater accomplishment, is a graduate of Carnegie Mellon, and was very complimentary of what you do there. Mr. Akins is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, a couple of questions. They're a little bit related. The first is, With the proposal before us, do we have the adequate mechanisms to ensure that patent rights and national security, particularly the patent right piece is the first part of my question, is that because we're doing a lot of sort of network types of development, do we still protect patent rights appropriately?
Clearly, that's a challenge in the evolving IT landscape. And I think it's one that this Congress will need to consider. For the most part, it's outside the portfolio of the NIDR program, is cooperation and R&D, but it surely plays into our ability to interact with the academic and the commercial sector, a very important part of what we need to be able to do. So I think there are major challenges here that constrain progress.
I think my next question is a bigger one and a harder one, because one of my other committee's assignments is on the Armed Services Committee, and we've taken a look at sort of unique forms of warfare, and one of the most threatening and one that we appear to be largely unprotected against is the whole hacking into networks. I'm not a whiz on computers, although I used to work for IBM, but my son is with the Marine Corps, and he's a communications guy, and he said we are absolutely wide open in this area. My understanding is there are hundreds or even thousands of attacks every day from China directed toward our information systems and hacking into them. One rather big situation, I think, was in the news. It was 2 days ago or so in a number of different countries where computers that had very sensitive information had been infiltrated with software which was downloading all of this sensitive information, and it was tracked back to China, which is no big surprise. Are we doing enough in that security? Because the hearings that I held as a subcommittee chairman indicated that there's good news and bad news. The good news is we can hack into anybody's stuff. The bad news is they can all hack into ours.
It is, in fact, I think, imperative that we somehow find a way to bridge across classification levels in order to allow more university-based researchers to participate in solving this problem. As it stands now, many university researchers are really not able to effectively participate in those programs, and that then ends up excluding a large amount of our technology base.
So what you're saying is that there are some solutions that could help us in this area, but because of the fact that they're coming from a university direction, that it's hard for them to connect with things like the systems that we're actually using nationally?
That's right. To give a concrete example, can we access data for access patterns to apply the latest machine learning algorithms to help understand these attacks? Even access to data is now an issue.
I don't totally understand what you're saying, but you're saying that we got this stovepipe stuff where one part of our nation's not talking to another, and we're not using all of the resources available to us. I gather that's what you're saying.
That's correct, sir.
How would you then change that? Would you say that you'd maybe put in some sort of a provision so that the Department of Defense would have more aggressive work with the university? I know at the Naval Academy they do. They have red team come in and hack and all that kind of stuff. My son just loved that, you know. But are you saying more of those kinds of programs would be helpful?
I think that would, in fact, do quite a lot. There are some natural defenses that just come out of new networking core research, new research in operating systems and software. But as it stands now, there's a virtual gulf that separates classified programs from open programs. And that gulf ends up creating a split personality, so to speak, in how we approach these cybersecurity problems.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Should have had your son as a witness today.
I bet he would have had some questions. I don't know about a witness. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Griffin is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question that hopefully you can shed some light on. At what level of the cell can you introduce this technology? At what level of the organism, when we're talking about healthcare, can you begin to measure? Can you measure outside the cell membrane, the nuclear membrane? Are you down into the DNA, RNA? I know that sequencing was critically important in your area, or it was critically important to us. But where are we now in general? Anybody can answer. It's a
Well, this is a very large question. In fact, there is ongoing information technology research that is literally trying to treat DNA sequences as computer code, literally programming DNA sequences in order to understand from the ground up exactly what all of these things mean. And that's a kind of a bottom-up approach from actually the top-down approach of looking at natural organisms. So we're very, very far down into the biochemistry today.
right. Thank you. Yes, please.
So in the laboratory and even laboratory-based analyses, again, very far down that path. In terms of worn systems that you might wear all the time, current state of technology isn't there. You're measuring higher level physiological, perhaps measuring blood glucose, perhaps capturing other physiological parameters. Those are actually quite easily accessible now, whereas the more detailed and DNA analysis is happening through collected samples and then in the laboratory. But these things advancing together help science and understanding of health tremendously, because you can do that analysis in the lab, but understand the exposures that people have had during the course of their everyday life.
I think it's a great selling tool, by the way, for young students to know that the advances in our computer technology have led to incredible advances in the care of patients. And I think that's attractive to them, and it attracts them in, just as the greening of America or saving our ecosystem. So we appreciate y'all being here. Thank you. You about my time.
Thank you, Dr. Griffin. Let's see. Mr. Hall says he doesn't have any questions at this time. So, Mr. Davis, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'll be very brief. As I heard the questions, engaging in those back and forth, and are concerned about China being able to tap into our most sensitive systems that we have and find information. Obviously, we can do the same thing, but do you see any way where we can ever prevent that? As we talked about the information superhighway, the highways in my district are interstates, so you go both ways on them. I'm just wondering, is there any way that we can perfect that would be able to block out without a certainty, with a certainty that no one will be able to tap into our information?
Thank you for that question. In fact, today's internet, just to take that as one key part of our information technology ecosystem, was designed to be completely open, to be that interstate that allows free traffic in all directions, literally without even any kind of traffic control. This it was fine in the early going. We've come to depend on it now, and it is well past time to rethink what the next generation internet should be. And in fact, there are concepts on the drawing boards that would provide large test beds to experiment with new architectures for the internet that could in fact be much more secure.
I'd like to add a comment. Having been around in those early days as the internet was being designed in that very open process, some people look back and say that was a mistake. I think of it a little bit more as you take a child, you introduce them in childcare, they start to be exposed to viruses and such things, and they build up some antibodies. You don't keep them in a bubble. And in that process of having the internet open and accessible, we've started to develop a stronger set of ideas of how you begin to protect yourself from these attacks. And I don't know that we'll see the day that we will be completely immune, but I think we can be much better in terms of our treatment of addressing these kinds of viruses and infections and building healthier immune systems, if you will, for our systems. I'd just like to say that a critical component of that is that we build systems whose security measures are actually usable by everyday people. A lot of the technology that ends up in critical government parts of the systems comes from the commercial side because it's less expensive, it has so much functionality to it, and so it's very important for our national security that our commercial and consumer information technology systems are built with important and the latest security ideas, and that those security ideas are actually usable, that the configurations and the defaults are ones that everyday people can do the right thing and the protective thing, because that technology ends up coming back into our national security systems.
So in essence, you're saying in the near future there's a possibility, a probability, likelihood that we'll be able to protect our most sensitive information to keep someone else from tapping into it, either of you?
I think we will be able to do better, and I don't see that as being something that is an absolute guarantee. We always have to remain vigilant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Mr. Davis, Dr. Bartlett's been out consulting with his son for a question, so you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm sorry that I couldn't have been here for your testimony and the discussion. I worked 8 years for IBM Corporation. As I mentioned to Dr. Lee, my youngest son, youngest of 10, chose to go to his university for his doctorate, which was ostensibly in chemical engineering, but he went there because his interest is in computers, and they hired him at Sandia Labs because of his expertise in computers. I have a growing concern that we're becoming too dependent on computers. They now are involved in almost everything we do. When the hacker comes in, he wants you to know that he broke into your house, so he pulls out the dresser drawers and strews the stuff all over the floor so that you know he was there. When the really bad guys come to your house and break in, they don't even want to disturb the dust on the dresser. They don't want you to know they were there. Several years ago, and I'm a senior member on the Armed Services Committee, several years ago, we commissioned several of our people to pretend that they were bad guys and see if they could break into our military computers. They did that 3,000 times. We caught them twice. Now, we're much wiser because of that, but so are the bad guys wiser when they make mistakes and they figure out what they need to do next time so as not to make the mistake. I have a growing concern that that they're just testing us with the viruses and the worms that they put in our computers now. And I'm concerned that in the operating systems, which I think we have trouble determining whether they are germ-free, that there could be a sleeper there that becomes active only with a big ramp up in activity, which is an emergency when you really need them. Shouldn't we have some redundancy in our society? Today we have essentially no redundancy. If the computers are down, and one thing that would bring all of our computers down is a single nuclear weapon detonated 300 miles high over Iowa or Nebraska. And the Russian generals tell us that would produce 200 kilovolts per meter, which is 100 kilovolts per meter at the margins of our country. That, of course, would fry all of our microelectronics. So you're essentially in a world in which the only person you can talk to is the person next to you, unless you happen to be a ham operator with a vacuum tube set 1,000,000 times less susceptible. And the only way you can go anywhere is to walk, unless you happen to have an Etzel or a similar kind of car. Shouldn't our society have some sort of redundancy? When something is really, really important in our military, we always build in redundancy, so if we lose the primary, we still can function. We can't function without computers, can we? Shouldn't we have a redundancy?
Yes, Congressman Bartlett, let me start by saying that your son, congratulations on his accomplishment. And I should say that I applied to Carnegie Mellon hoping to do my own PhD studies there and was not admitted, so I'm very impressed with your son. Indeed, I think that we are facing some significant challenges, as you say, and redundancy is the most simple thing that we could imagine doing. Indeed, Wall Street uses redundant systems. for precisely the reasons that
Redundant computer systems?
Yes,
They're all down under some scenarios.
that's true. And indeed, simple redundancy turns out to give you maybe one layer of protection. But in basic computer science algorithms research today, and we saw this at the symposium of the Library of Congress last week, there are far more sophisticated concepts in the general area of redundancy and diversity that could lead to a great deal more reliability and robustness.
I don't know where we go.
You got them all
I'm
scared.
just more and more concerned that the more sophisticated we become in using computers, the more vulnerable we are.
It's a clearly valid concern. In the scenario you gave, which is clearly disastrous from all perspectives, just addressing the bringing back of the information technology and such, it is, while it's about the U.S., it is, we know from security that when you do backups, you don't just keep backups locally. You also ship some backups off to a remote location. I'm from Los Angeles. We have all sources of natural disasters there. We always do our backups off-site. And in that sense, I would expect that there are programs within our government as well that has backup of key data sets and key resources off-site, so that one way that you deal with this problem is to allow yourself to do rapid restructuring, rapid buildup of a replacement infrastructure.
But all computer replacement infrastructure.
Yes.
Yes, I'm asking, shouldn't we have another fallback redundancy?
I'm certainly, from a government infrastructure, community infrastructure, I think your fallback are a well-trained citizenry and people and governments. I'm not sure what form that takes in the information transfer. I think it's a very interesting question, how we think about starting to bring up our capacity, relying again on the human beings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I can help the gentleman if he'd like. For a fallback redundancy, I still have my Big Chief tablet and cedar pencil.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. I think Dr. Bartlett's got the beginnings of a good screenplay. Mr. Lujan, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I want to go back to the importance and the questioning with collaboration with some of the entities that have capabilities, whether it's through our laboratories with the emphasis in DOD and DOE. Dr. Estrin, you said that it was important that the commercial aspect of this drive the security of the experience and what can be done to protect the networks with the federal government. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sorry if I wasn't clear. I didn't mean that it should drive. Clearly, you have to have classified activities and government-focused activities. What I meant is that if you look empirically and historically, you see the adoption of commercial technology in our everyday government business, both classified and unclassified. And so since we know that there is technology that the government wants to bring in from the commercial sector, it's important from the government's interest that the technology that's being produced in the government sector has built into it good forms of security and usable forms of security. Does that clarify?
Absolutely, and I appreciate that very much. And that's really the basis for the line of questioning. Dr. Lee, you mentioned the importance of the collaboration between entities. I think Mr. Aiken asked a question along those lines about how are we collaborating with all of the efforts and the investment that's been made in so many of these areas. And with your experience, and I would ask Dr. Greer the same question, with your experience, how can we truly move forward where we're collaborating more, where we're supporting more tech transfer, where we're taking advantage of the investments that we made within laboratories with the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Office of Science, and others, to utilize that brain trust and that expertise to move forward with some of the modeling that can take place, the supercomputing capabilities in all aspects, especially in the area of energy, disease, smart grid applications, developing the necessary software and security with their experience with the number of threats that they experience on a daily basis as well.
Thank you, Mr. Lujan. Indeed, just recently, the former CIO G6 of the U.S. Army, Stephen Buttel, informed me that during his tenure, the U.S. Army had moved to a position where over 80% of the software and networking technology employed by the U.S. Army today is commercial off-the-shelf, COTS. And this raises a specific question about how we can certify the security and trustworthiness of commercial systems. This goes all the way down even to the hardware and the circuitry. And in fact, as Dr. Greer had mentioned and emphasized before, much of this is really core research in areas related to software development, software analysis, and networking. And I believe that if we are able to increase the base of agency support for academic research, right now we're at 86% coming from the National Science Foundation. If we're able to expand into other areas, DARPA and other defense agencies and DOE, we will be able to provide a wider range of attacks on this problem and really come to grips with our needs, particularly in this security-related and trustworthiness-related area.
I would second what Dr. Lee has had to say, in the sense that inherent in your question are a number of basic research challenges that the NITRD agencies are currently investing in, including issues of software assurance, validation, and verification. And how can you ensure that a software package being delivered does what it's purported to do, that the system doesn't have any Trojan horses and so on. That's an example of a very basic research question. In the end, what we're striving for is research and development informed by implementation, and implementation informed by research and development. There's a cycle and an interaction that has to go on there. That's all about communication amongst the various groups. And that's what's important to us.
Thank you, Dr. Greer. Mr. Chairman, I certainly appreciate the fact that this is coming forward and the importance of competes that you've stressed as well. And as we look to see how we can incorporate the federal laboratories into the educational component, but it's specifically in the area when we're talking about large-scale research in areas of national importance, and we characterize those, I truly believe that if we harness that energy and we're able to expose so many of our young people when they're in junior high, even elementary and high school, to some of the research taking place at our national laboratories, include them into that field where we can take advantage of those opportunities, really use them as a hub to expand our university system and those capabilities as it translates to solving some of our large-scale problems is something that we can truly do. And so I appreciate the inclusion of those in the Act.
Thank you, Mr. Lujan. You're absolutely correct. Our national labs are a tremendous resource, and by the synergy of them working with the universities and the private sector is going to make a big difference in our country. In the Competes bill, we did address some of this so that there will be collaboration where both teachers and students can go into the labs, and hopefully those teachers come back and get the kids excited. Before we close, is there anyone else that would like to ask another question? If not, I want to thank our witnesses. This has been a very good hearing. You provided us very good information. Oh, right. We will. We will. This is not as high profile now maybe as climate change and energy independence and health care, but it's important to all those areas. And we hope that this bill will help us to move forward. Let me also say that we welcome any further comments you might have in terms of our bill, and we welcome also comments from the audience here and for those that are listening over the internet or watching for this transcript. And the record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional statements from members and for answers to any of the follow-up questions that the committee may ask of the witnesses. So the witnesses are excused and the hearing is adjourned. Thank you.